Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your host and beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August of 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through another offseason together. All right, folks, big news for the Jaguars on Monday. A day after the AFC and NFC Conference Championship games, as more and more clarity is coming out on the remaining coaching vacancies, it was reported by ESPN's Adam Schefter that Jaguars offense coordinator Grant Udinski would be pulling his name from consideration for the Cleveland Browns head coaching search. Udinski, of course, is a finalist for the Browns search, also interviewed in person with the Buffalo Bills. I don't think anybody has a great feel for what direction the Bills are leaning right now. So tough to say whether or not he feels like a serious candidate, whether or not it feels like he's somebody who's kind of on the wayside there. But at least some clarity now in terms of the Browns job. The Browns job had seemed the most likely for him. I mean, the fact that he was clearly a finalist along Jim Schwartz and Nate Shieldhouse. As I've been telling you guys, on here for the last couple of days, it's definitely seemed like there's been more concern from inside the Miller Electric Center and the Jaguars, hub that about losing Anthony Campanile to the Arizona Cardinals, I believe. I'm just not sure the Jaguars ever, they obviously prepare for all scenarios. I'm just not sure they ever felt that much anxiety about the reality of the Browns hiring Udinski. And I think their instincts on that were right. I don't think that's like anything negative about Udinski, obviously. Udinski is going to get more at-bats, bites at the apple, whatever you want to call it, next year. He'll be one of the top coaching candidates next year as long as the offense doesn't crater a la, Texans 2024, the Bobby Sloak situation where he interviews for a ton of head coach jobs one year and is fired the next year. I don't expect that to happen, obviously, but Sloak's a good example. That's never a guarantee that your name will be as popular as it is as at any one point. But I would expect Udinski, as long as the Jaguars do what they're supposed to do next year and win some games, at least even have another winning season, that he'll be one of the top head coach candidates in the NFL next year. And I think that, for him, while there are good examples of it hurting guys not getting the job then, there are also good examples of it working out for some guys. I mean, Ben Johnson pulled out the Washington Commanders search. I mean, that certainly worked out, for him in Chicago, where he's clearly, thriving after his first year there. So here's what ESPN's Adam Schefter had to report about Grant Udinski. He said, Jaguars OC Grant Udinski has informed the Browns that he is removing himself from consideration for their head coach position per source. Udinski has a new deal in place with Jacksonville that will bump his pay for next season, but the Jaguars are allowing him to continue pursuing the Bills head coach job. If Udinski doesn't get the Buffalo job, he will be back as the Jaguars OC. Now, there will certainly be a lot of debate, a lot of even copium from all kinds of, different sides of this saying, oh, did he really pull his name? Was he ever going to get the job? If you're the Jaguars, it doesn't matter. That's something for the Browns and their media sphere and their fan base to talk about. If you're the Jaguars, it literally doesn't matter why Grant Udinski isn't in the running for the Browns head coaching job anymore. It just matters that he's not. It simply means for the Jaguars, regardless of how it went down, that the chances of them bringing a key piece of Liam Cohen's staff back to the sidelines just went up dramatically. You still have the Bills, of course. And obviously he doesn't have like a direct tie to the Bills and Josh Allen like Joe Brady and Brian Dable do, or Davis Webb does. But he obviously worked closely with Sam Darnold in the Vikings quarterback room in 2024. Darnold and Allen are said to be close. So I'm sure that Udinski probably would start off on a pretty good foot with Allen, who is said to be, a key part of the Bills process as they look for their next head coach. I think at the end of the day, there's not enough to rule out Udinski as a potential hire in Buffalo. I still kind of expect him to go the way of Webb or Dable. But at the least, it just seemed like at the peak of things, Cleveland felt more like a threat for Udinski than Buffalo ever has. I mean, Cleveland made him a finalist. He got a second interview with them. And if you're Udinski, like I said, it matters for the Browns why Udinski is no longer in the running. It probably matters for Udinski. It doesn't matter for the Jaguars. But if you're Udinski, I think that obviously, you can feel good about this for a couple of reasons. One, the bump in pay isn't bad at all. I mean, he obviously makes out well just from the fact that he was considered for some kind of role and that he now has some leverage, with the Jaguars. I think that, biggest thing for Udinski, truly to me, to build his resume, as a potential head coach in the NFL, is just more time on task, more years spent in the trenches, getting more connections, throughout the league. If I was writing a Grant Udinski head coach, scouting report, and I was a team looking to hire him, and somebody asked me what my biggest concern would be, there'd be concerns about a ton of these guys. Davis Webb has barely been a coach. Brian Dable, outside of being gifted with, two of Josh Allen's best years at the helm, he hasn't ever had a good offense in the NFL. So his track record definitely looks like he was just kind of in the right place at the right time. There's something to poke at for all these guys. For Grant Udinski, I firmly believe, and I would say it is, like if I was the Browns and I was like looking over, their potential hire, the one thing that would have worried me about Udinski is who will he have on his staff? And that's not me saying like he wouldn't put together a good staff. I just wonder how many connections he's been able to build, to really take a head coach role and run with it after just a handful of years, or around the block and in the NFL. But this is fantastic news for the Jaguars. And I'm saying that while recognizing that the Jaguars have more at stake if Anthony Campanile leaves. They absolutely do. Camp is more valuable to the Jaguars right now. That's nothing to take away from Udinski, who I enjoyed covering this past year. I thought he does a good job on the podium, obviously, but more importantly, I talked to a lot of players, and they all really enjoy him. The quarterback room particularly loves him. He's very hands-on with the quarterbacks. I mean, in terms of a non-play calling offensive coordinator, it definitely seems like he makes an impact, and he has value that is found in other ways as well that I think isn't as easily seen for people. So retaining him is significant. The fact that Liam Cohen doesn't have to search for a new coordinator, I mean, he doesn't have to change any part of that staff as long as Udinski doesn't get the Bills job. And yeah, that's going to hang around. That's going to loom. That's going to be kind of the cloud hanging above the Jaguars until the Bills find their coach. But with Udinski at least being much more likely to stay now than he was, I'd say, 48 hours ago, I'd say it's clear what value his retainment would have to the Jaguars, specifically Trevor Lawrence. Look at Trevor Lawrence's career. The play caller hasn't changed every year, but something about the Jaguars offense has really changed every year with him. Obviously, his first year, Urban Meyer, Darrell Bevell, Brian Schottenheimer, nobody's there next year. He gets Doug Peterson. He gets Press Taylor. He gets Mike McCoy, as his head coach, coordinator, quarterback coach. And then there's also Jim Bob Cooter as a passing game coordinator. Jim Bob Cooter leaves after that year. They hired Nick Holes. Nick Holes leaves after that year. He's back to Doug and Press. Doug and Press, obviously get let go. Goes to Liam, and then Grant, Shane Waldron, Spencer Whipple. And they can keep that core together and just keep something close to a intact foundation for Trevor Lawrence to build from. I think it could do wonders for Trevor because we just haven't seen him work with that in his NFL career. So make no mistake, Grant Udinski pulling out the Browns' job. Significant news for the Jaguars to start their week. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. As always, I'm John Shipley.